Why are you here?
Trevor asked me to officially date him. I said no.
Maybe you haven't given him enough time.
Don't push me towards someone I don't want. Just so you don't have to face your own feelings.
If I let myself love you, then what did all those years with Claire mean?
It means you are still alive.
I don't know if I can do this. Hannah!
Some words, once spoken, become an invisible wall, forever trapping us in belated regret. Before that desperate cry tore through the night, everything began with a suffocating silence. 3 years ago, Walter Boyd confined himself to his porch, clinging to old habits amidst a lonely apple orchard, rejecting any new life from entering his world. That is, until the first apple pie of the season arrived, brought by a brave young woman who dared to cross the boundary. Sometimes, fear and prejudice become the cruelest prisons of our own making. If you have ever unknowingly pushed away someone you love out of a fear of getting hurt, linger here on this porch with me. What would you do if you were Walter in the exact moment he lost her? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join me in uncovering what truly awaits on the other side of the field. Are you ready? I am 50 years old, widowed for 3 years, and that Tuesday morning I said something I thought was just a joke. She placed the warm apple pie on the porch railing, and I blurted out, if only I were 20 years younger. I waited for her to laugh it off and change the subject, like every time I said something awkward. She didn't laugh. She looked me straight in the eyes, unashamed, not teasing, and said something that left me stunned amidst the scent of apple and cinnamon in the cold early autumn air. 20 years wouldn't change a thing. Then she turned away, crossed the field toward her greenhouse, leaving me with that sentence hanging in the air between us. For 3 years, I had tried not to look at her that way. My name is Walter Boyd. This apple orchard has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather planted the first rows of trees on the southern slope. My father expanded it all the way to the creek, and I was the one who built the small cider mill behind the barn, where every autumn the whole town can smell the fermenting pressed apples wafting from the oak barrels. At 50, I run it on a mix of old habits and a few new machines. An electric press, software that logs the sugar content of each batch, a GPS-equipped tractor that I still haven't quite learned to trust. But no matter how many modern things I bring in, the day still starts before sunrise and doesn't end until I make my final round of the trees. It's the kind of work that doesn't let you stand still long enough to think. And for the past 3 years, I've been incredibly grateful for that. I always thought I'd grow old here with my wife, Claire. We got married when I was 28. She wasn't just my wife. She was the one who helped me rebuild this place after several years when the orchard was nearly wiped out by frost. She kept the books, ran the roadside apple stand, and somehow turned this big, empty wooden house into a place to come home to. Claire had a habit of tasting every batch of cider before I bottled it, wincing if it was too tart, nodding if it was just right. I sold 1,000 bottles a year, yet I never trusted a single batch until she gave her nod. 3 years ago, she passed away after nearly a year battling cancer. We had time to prepare. But knowing something is coming doesn't make an empty house any easier to walk into. The morning after the funeral, I went straight to the barn like every other day. Not because I was strong. I just didn't know what else to do. I woke up at the exact same time, brewed the exact same black coffee, put on the exact same work clothes, and stepped outside as if nothing had changed. As if, by keeping every habit exactly the same, maybe she would still be somewhere in the house, just out of sight for a moment. She never came back. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her favorite mug still sat in the cupboard. The east room where she used to sit and do paperwork remained locked. I couldn't bring myself to open that door. Every time I walked past it, I'd picture her sitting at the desk, wearing her glasses, reminding me not to skip lunch. So I kept the door shut, and I took the long way around the hallway to avoid looking at it. People think grief is a storm. To me, it felt more like a fence. Something I built around myself, claiming it was to keep everything in its place, when in reality, it just kept me standing in one place. If you've ever walked into a room and felt someone's absence more profoundly than when they were actually there, then this story is for you. And you might be surprised by how it ends. Please leave a like to let me know you're sitting here with me, and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear what eventually happened behind that door. Now, let me continue the story. The Tuesday neighbor, the only person who regularly crossed the field between our two properties, was Hannah Cole, my 25-year-old neighbor. Hannah's family had owned the farm to the north for years. I had known her since she was a kid. But it wasn't until she finished her degree in agricultural management, came back, and took over the place that I started looking at her as a grown woman. Her parents had moved to Burlington to be closer to their oldest daughter and grandkids. Hannah stayed behind, managing 60 acres all on her own. A flower farm, 2 organic vegetable greenhouses, and a small online bakery. She didn't need anyone's help. She fixed her own fences, drove her own tractor, treated sick animals herself, and negotiated prices with distributors on her own. She even used social media to sell her goods, something I had always considered a hassle until she showed me how to take pre-orders for my apple stand, nearly doubling my holiday revenue. Once, I watched her haul a bag of fertilizer that was half her size. She caught my eye and just raised an eyebrow, as if daring me to step in and offer a hand. 2 weeks after Claire's funeral, Hannah showed up on my porch with a pot of soup. She held it out and said, "I cooked a bit too much. Help me eat this." I knew it was just an excuse to spare me from feeling pathetic. I took the pot and told her she didn't have to do that. She replied, "I know." After that day, almost every Tuesday morning, she would bring something over. Sometimes bread, sometimes stew, sometimes fresh vegetables, sometimes just 2 cups of coffee. Every time, I told her she didn't have to do it. And every time, she replied that she knew. Those Tuesday mornings slowly became a part of my week. I never asked if she was coming over, but I started brewing extra coffee and made sure to finish my chores around the house before 9. Hannah would sit on the porch for about half an hour. She'd ask about the orchard, talk about troubles in the greenhouse, or ask for my opinion on a piece of machinery she was thinking of buying. She could sit in silence without making it feel heavy. I kept her safely tucked away in a specific box in my mind. A kind neighbor, a young friend, the daughter of people I had known for a long time. I didn't allow myself to look at her in any other way. There's one thing I haven't told anyone. Last spring, after a heavy rain, a section of the northern fence on her property collapsed. I saw it from my side of the land while inspecting the trees. I didn't wait for her to call. I loaded wood and tools into my truck and drove over before breakfast. We worked for most of the day. When we finished, she brought out 2 bottles of water, sat down next to me on the grass, and asked how much she owed me. I told her nothing. She looked at me then. A calm, direct, unreadable look. I didn't understand it at the time. I just drove home, told myself that neighbors help neighbors, and forgot about it as quickly as possible. At the end of September this year, on a Tuesday morning, I woke up before dawn as usual. I brewed coffee, then realized I had poured 2 cups. I stood there for a moment, looking at the second steaming mug on the kitchen counter. I didn't remember pouring it. And for the first time in a long while, I asked myself why I still did this every morning. The apple pie, the second cup, went cold on the counter before I could drink it. I carried both out to the porch, placed one on the railing out of habit, and sat down on the steps with mine. Late September mornings were already chilly. Dew still clung to the trees near the house, and further out, the field between my land and Hannah's was covered in a thin, lingering mist. I sat there, listening to someone's cows lowing from the north, and waited. I didn't admit to myself that I was waiting. I just sat there longer than necessary, instead of going back to work like every other morning. Around 9 o'clock, I saw her. Hannah crossed the field, her hands cradling something covered with a cloth. She wore jeans and a plaid shirt, her hair tied back. As she got closer, I saw a streak of flour on her cheek. She set the covered dish on the railing, right next to the coffee cup I had poured for her earlier, and uncovered it. A warm apple pie, its crust golden brown, the scent of cinnamon and baked apples radiating into the crisp air. "Apples from the trees south of my house," she said. "The first batch this year is really sweet." I looked at the pie she had clearly put effort into making, then looked at her. For 3 years, she had crossed that field to bring me food without ever asking for anything in return. I thought about that, about the flour on her cheek, about the 2 steaming cups of coffee side by side on the railing, and the words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. If only I were 20 years younger. I waited for her to laugh it off, shake her head, and change the subject like she always did when I said something clumsy. She didn't. Hannah stood perfectly still. Her eyes locked onto mine, calm, unashamed, not teasing. It was the kind of look that makes a man forget what to do next. After a few seconds, she placed her hand next to the pie and took a small step back. 20 years wouldn't change a thing. I frowned. "What do you mean by that?" She didn't answer immediately. She just looked at me, as if weighing whether to say more. Then she turned and walked down the steps. "I have to go check the greenhouses," she called over her shoulder. I watched her cross the field. Even after she disappeared behind the tree line, I stayed rooted to my spot, her words still hanging in the air between us. All that day, while I recalibrated the press, checked the fermentation barrels, and hauled produce to the roadside stand, that sentence kept echoing in my mind. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing. That's just how Hannah was. Direct, sometimes blunt. But the harder I tried to push it away, the clearer it became that those Tuesday mornings were never just about a neighbor dropping off food. For the first time in 3 years, I went to bed wondering what would happen if I stopped pretending I didn't know that. From the morning of the apple pie, I began noticing things I had spent 3 years trying not to see. Hannah had never brought food to anyone else in the area the way she brought it to me. In all that time, I had never seen her cross any other field with a covered plate. She knew how I took my coffee. Black, no sugar. She knew the days I took deliveries to the farmer's market, the weeks when the workload was so heavy I grew irritable. She never asked. She just knew. And I remembered something else, the day we fixed the fence last spring. The way she sat down beside me on the grass and asked how much she owed me. The look she gave me when I said nothing. It was the exact same look she had given me this morning, standing by the pie. I didn't understand it then. Now, I feared I did. The divide for nearly 2 weeks, I turned that sentence over and over in my head. 20 years wouldn't change a thing. I didn't have the courage to ask her what she meant, so I argued with myself instead. She was 25. I was 50. Had life taken a different turn, I was old enough to be her father. I had had a long marriage and a wife I still hadn't learned to live without. Hannah deserved a younger man, someone who could build a future with her, instead of forcing her to watch her years drain away too soon. It seemed the whole town agreed. Trevor Lang was 28, the son of the owner of the county's biggest farm equipment chain. He had studied business in Boston before returning to run the local branch. Tall, well-dressed, smooth-talking, with money in the bank. For almost a year, he had been courting Hannah openly, showing up in a brand-new pickup truck with flowers or an expensive bottle of wine, offering to connect her with larger distributors, standing beside her at every town event. He was always polite whenever he saw me. He was kind to the elderly. On paper, he was exactly the kind of man a 25-year-old woman with her own farm should choose. I didn't like him, but I couldn't call him a bad guy. One afternoon, I stopped by the hardware store to buy some fertilizer for the saplings. 2 men near the counter were talking about the upcoming Apple Harvest Festival, a few weeks away. Trevor had asked Hannah to go with him. She told him to let her think about it. One man laughed, saying that was practically a yes. The other said Hannah was finally realizing she couldn't run that farm alone forever. I stood in front of the shelves, pretending to read labels I couldn't see clearly. I had no right to feel anything about it. I had never spoken a word to Hannah about how I felt. I had even pretended not to understand her answer that morning. If she chose Trevor, it would be the logical, safe choice. I hauled the fertilizer home, unloaded it, and sat on the porch looking across the field toward her house. I thought about Claire. During her final months, we had many conversations I hadn't wanted to have. One night, she told me that after she was gone, I wasn't allowed to turn the rest of my life into a punishment. I had gotten angry and told her to stop talking like she was already dead. She just squeezed my hand. "You're going to keep living, Walter," she said. "The only question is whether you'll actually live or just keep breathing." At the time, I thought going back to the orchard, keeping this place running and not collapsing, meant I was honoring her wish. Now I understood I was merely existing inside a carefully repeated schedule just to avoid feeling anything new. That evening, I crossed the field to Hannah's property. She was working on another section of fencing between our lots. I stopped on my side, resting my hand on the top rail, and waited. She saw me but kept tightening a bolt. "Hannah. Walter. I've been thinking about what you said." She didn't look up. "I say a lot of things. You know which one I mean." She put her wrench down and finally turned to face me. I took a slow breath. "That morning, you told me 20 years wouldn't change a thing. I need to know what you meant by that." She stayed silent for a long time. I could see her deciding whether to be honest or to protect us both by changing the subject. Finally, she stepped closer to the fence. "You said you wished you were 20 years younger," she said slowly. "But I don't bring you food because I'm looking for a younger version of you." I didn't answer. My hands gripped the wooden rail, and I stood there on my side of the land, not knowing what to say, while the field darkened between us and her statement went unanswered. The distance I walked home that night without managing to say another word. I had crossed the field to clear things up. By the time I left, I knew I could no longer pretend there was nothing between us. After that conversation by the fence, things between Hannah and me shifted, though neither of us crossed any boundaries. She still came over on Tuesday mornings, but she didn't stay long. She dropped off the food, asked how the orchard was doing, and left within minutes. She wasn't angry. She wasn't overtly cold. She was simply guarded. And that distance hurt me more than any argument could have. I found myself both waiting for the sound of her boots on the steps and dreading it. Every time she appeared, the house felt different while she was in it. I noticed her laugh, the way she stood by the sink when pouring her own coffee, the way she always neatly folded the dish towel, even though I usually just left it crumpled on the counter. And I noticed how unbearably empty the rooms felt after she left. I tried to tell myself it was just because I had gotten used to having her around. I knew I was lying. A week before the festival, Hannah stopped by my roadside stand to drop off some boxes of jams and pies. We had an arrangement to sell each other's goods on weekends. As I stacked the boxes, I asked if she was planning to go to the festival. She looked at me for a few seconds before answering. "Trevor asked me." I heard. I haven't given him an answer yet. She was giving me a chance. All I needed to do was say I wanted her to go with me, and she almost certainly would have turned him down. Instead, I looked at her and thought about the 25 years between us, about all the questions she would have to answer if she chose me. "Trevor is a good guy," I said. Her smile vanished. "That wasn't what I asked. He's young, has a stable job, understands the work you do. Are you writing a letter of recommendation for him on my behalf?" I turned away and started restacking the jam jars that were already perfectly neat. "I'm just saying you should think about what's best for your future." Hannah was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was calm but colder than I had ever heard it. "You're making decisions for me again." She closed the empty boxes, said goodbye, and walked out. 2 days later, I heard she had accepted Trevor's invitation to the festival. The night of the festival, I stayed home. I told myself I still had work to do, but the truth was I had finished everything by 7. From the kitchen window, I could see the distant lights of the town. I pictured Hannah there, in a dress she almost never wore, laughing with a man who made infinitely more sense for her than I ever could. I opened the fridge and took out the last slice of the apple pie she had brought the week before. I stood at the kitchen counter eating it, tasting absolutely nothing. Around 9, I heard a truck turn into my driveway. Hannah got out alone. She was wearing a dark green dress under a long coat, her hair down instead of tied back like she always wore it for work. I had never seen her look like that. For a few seconds, I couldn't find the words. She walked up onto the porch. "Why are you here?" I asked. "I left early. Where's Trevor?" "He dropped me off at my house." I walked over here. It was cold outside. I opened the door to let her in. She stood in the middle of the living room, hands still clutching her purse as if unsure whether she should have come. "Trevor asked me to officially date him," she said. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "What did you say?" I said no. "Why?" Hannah looked at me as if she couldn't believe I still had to ask. "Because I don't love him. Maybe you haven't given him enough time." "Don't do this, Walter." "Do what?" "Push me towards someone I don't want, just so you don't have to face your own feelings." I looked away. "You don't know how I feel." "Then tell me." The room fell silent. I glanced at the wedding photo of Claire and me sitting on the shelf. Hannah followed my gaze. "I loved my wife," I said. "I know. I thought I would never feel that way about anyone else again. I'm not asking you to forget her. If I let myself love you, then what did all those years I had with Claire mean? It means you loved her, and that you are still alive." I closed my eyes. "I'm afraid I'm betraying her." Hannah took a small step closer but didn't touch me. "Do you really think Claire would want you to be alone in this house for the rest of your life?" I remembered the night she told me not to punish myself, and I couldn't answer. Hannah's voice was softer when she spoke again. "I don't want to take her place. I can't. I just need to know if there's still room in your life for someone else." I looked at her. Beneath the toughness on her face was real pain. For 3 years, she had shown up for me without asking for anything. When she finally told me the truth, I was using my age and my past to make her feel like her feelings were a mistake. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted. She nodded. Her eyes were glassy, but she didn't cry. "I understand." She turned toward the door. Just before stepping outside, she stopped. "But I can't keep crossing that field every week and pretending I'm just a neighbor dropping off food for you." Then she left. The following Tuesday morning, Hannah didn't come over. It was the first time in 3 years that the porch was empty on a Tuesday morning. I stood in the kitchen looking at the 2 cups of coffee I had already poured, and I realized that I wasn't just afraid of starting something with her. I was terrified I had lost her before I even allowed myself to begin. Unlocking the door 2 weeks after the festival, Hannah still hadn't crossed the field. We texted about shared inventory at the stand, but every exchange was strictly about business. No more Tuesday morning visits. No more coffee on the porch. No more comfortable silences that didn't need to be filled with words. I hadn't realized how heavily I relied on her presence until it was gone. I caught myself glancing at the chair she usually sat in every time I walked past it. When checking the southern fence, I found my eyes searching for her across the field. One afternoon, I saw her working with a new farmhand and stood watching longer than necessary, just to make sure it wasn't Trevor. I started asking myself what exactly I was protecting her from. The age gap was real. I would grow old before her. There might come a day when she would have to care for me while she still had decades ahead of her. I couldn't promise our life together would be easy. But rejecting her didn't guarantee she would be happier with a younger man. It only guaranteed that we would both have to live with a choice I had made for her. That night, I unlocked the East Room. Dust coated Claire's desk. Her old ledgers were still neatly stacked, one of her sweaters still draped over the back of the chair. I sat down at the desk and let myself remember her. Not just the final months, but the years we had truly lived. Claire always hated how I turned every decision into a calculation, leaving no room for what I genuinely wanted. She once said I could find 100 reasons not to do the one thing I actually wanted to do. I pictured her sitting across from me now. She would probably ask one simple question. "Do you love Hannah?" This time, I didn't try to dodge the answer. Yes. It wasn't the same as what I had felt with Claire. It wasn't a replacement or something born purely out of loneliness. I loved the way Hannah had built her own life. I loved her bluntness, her patience, and the way she saw right through the layers of silence I wrapped around myself. I began cleaning the room. I didn't throw Claire's things away. I packed them carefully, keeping what was important, sending a few items to her sister. I opened the curtains, wiped the windows, and let the light flood into the room for the first time in 3 years. After that, I fixed the loose railing on the porch, replaced the warped kitchen window frame, and cleared away the extra chair at the dining table. I wasn't trying to erase Claire. I was just finally acknowledging that this house could still have a future. On Thursday afternoon, I walked over to Hannah's house. She was in one of the greenhouses, checking the irrigation system. When she saw me, she didn't smile like she used to, but she turned off the water and waited. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I asked. "Say what you need to say." I was wrong. She crossed her arms and waited for me to continue. I used the age gap as an excuse so I wouldn't have to admit that I was scared. Scared of hurting you. Scared of what people would say about you choosing me. Scared that one day you'd look back and regret it. Those things could still happen. I know. So what changed? I finally realized that you have the right to decide what risks you're willing to take. Hannah was quiet. I took a few steps closer, but kept enough distance so she wouldn't feel pressured. I can't promise I'll still be healthy 25 years from now. I can't promise people won't talk. I can't give you a life that doesn't come with a past. I never asked for any of that. I know. But I needed to say it out loud. I took a slow breath. What I can promise is that I won't treat you like a girl who doesn't know what she wants. I promise I will be honest even when I'm scared. And I promise that if we start this, I won't love you by halves just because I feel guilty about the past. Something in Hannah's face softened, but she still didn't speak. "I want to date you," I said. "Not because you took care of me. Not because I'm lonely. I want the chance to know you as the woman you truly are. If you still want that." She looked at me for a long time. "I don't need a younger version of you," she said. I never did. I stood there, amidst the smell of damp earth and green leaves in the greenhouse, saying nothing. A sparrow perched on the rafters above, preened its wings, then flew out through the slightly open door. Water dripped somewhere from the turned-off irrigation pipe. Hannah didn't walk toward me, and I didn't walk toward her. We just stood there, on opposite sides of a narrow path between the rows of plants, and for the first time in weeks, the distance between us no longer felt like a wall. "It took you 3 years and a few extra weeks to say that," she finally spoke up. "You'll need to think it over." The corner of her mouth lifted. I know. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. She invited me inside for coffee. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table, the same table where Trevor had once brought flowers. She poured coffee for both of us, black, no sugar for me, and we agreed to take things slow. We weren't going to jump straight from neighbors to something entirely serious just because we had known each other for years. I agreed. She wrapped her hands around her mug, and I realized my shoulders had finally dropped without me even noticing. Building a life nearly a year after we started dating, Hannah and I still lived on our separate properties. We were in no rush to get married. During the day, we each tended to our own work. In the evenings, we ate together, sometimes at my house, sometimes at hers. On weekends, we discussed ways our two farms could collaborate. Hannah suggested combining the apple stand with her produce, creating a joint brand focused on local goods. At first, I worried about mixing business with a relatively new relationship, but she laid out a clear legal structure and a fair division of ownership. She didn't want to depend on me. She wanted us to be equal partners. That made me more certain of her than anything else. In the spring, a severe storm tore the roof off a section of her greenhouse. I brought my farmhands over at the crack of dawn. We worked until evening to rebuild the frame and move all the saplings to safety. When everything was finally secure, Hannah stood in the middle of the damaged greenhouse, clothes caked in mud, hair tangled by the wind. She looked at me and said, "You showed up again without me even having to call. I think it's become a habit for you. That's why I love you." That night, I took her back to my place. On the kitchen counter was an apple pie I had tried to bake using her recipe. It was lopsided, and the crust was burnt on one side. Hannah stared at it for a long time. "You made this?" "I tried. I can see that." I pulled the ring out of my pocket. It was simple, nothing flashy, because I knew she didn't like flashy things. 3 years ago, you brought me a pie, and I said something stupid because I was too scared to say how I really felt, I told her. "I thought the age gap meant I wasn't good enough for you." Then I realized the issue wasn't how many years I had left. It was how I was going to live those remaining years. I got down on one knee by the table. "Hannah Cole, will you build a life with me that we both choose?" She was laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you proposing with a burnt pie? I can bake another one." "Don't you dare. I want this one." Then she nodded. "Yes." We got married in early autumn on the strip of land between our two properties. A small ceremony, just family, a few close friends, our workers, and the neighbors who had watched this story unfold from the beginning. The day before the wedding, I visited Claire's grave. I brought flowers and sat there for a long time. I told her about Hannah, though I believed that if she could see me from wherever she was, she probably already knew. I said I still loved her and would always be grateful for the life we shared. I also told her that I was finally ready to keep living. After the wedding, Hannah didn't just move into my house and leave everything behind. We formed a joint company to manage both properties but retained individual ownership of the land we each brought in. The East Room became our shared office. One corner still held Claire's old desk and a few photographs. Hannah never asked me to put them away. On the new desk by the window was her computer, the ledgers for both farms, and a photo of us on our wedding day. Our life wasn't perfect. There were still days when I felt too old standing next to her. There were still times when Hannah worried the future was rushing in too fast. But instead of hiding those fears, we voiced them and faced them together. 2 years after our wedding, Hannah gave birth to a son. When I found out I was going to be a father at 52, I didn't feel pure joy right away. I felt terrified. Terrified that I wasn't young enough to chase after him. Terrified I wouldn't live long enough to see all his milestones. Terrified that one day, Hannah would have to raise him alone. One evening, I poured all those fears out to her, right on the same porch where she had brought me that first apple pie. She took my hand. "You can't control how long you're here," she said, "but you do decide how truly present you are for every day you have." I looked at her. "What if I'm not enough? You showed up the morning after the storm when I didn't even call. You took care of Claire until the very end. You keep this place running and honor your promises to the people who rely on you." She squeezed my hand. "You've known how to be a father for a long time, Walter. It's just that no one has called you by that name yet. Our son was born on a cold January morning. We named him William, after my father. The first time I held him in my arms, the fear was still there. But right alongside, it was a gratitude deeper than anything I knew how to put into words. One Tuesday morning, 3 years after our wedding, I was inspecting the southern fence when I saw Hannah crossing the field toward me. She was carrying William, now almost 2 years old, with his mother's serious brown eyes and light brown hair. In her other hand, she held an apple pie. I opened the gate for them. When they reached me, I scooped William into my arms and looked at the pie. "Apples from the southern trees?" I asked. "The best ones." I looked at Hannah, looked at my son, looked at the house that had once felt so vast and empty for just one person. "If only I were 20 years younger," I said. This time, I wasn't using that phrase to hide or turn my feelings into a joke. I was simply admitting that I wished I had more years to spend with this family. Hannah understood. She stepped closer and rested her hand on my arm. 20 years wouldn't change a thing," she said. "I don't need a younger version of you." She looked at me, then at William. "I need you. Exactly the man who walked into my life at the exact moment you did." Out there, the wind swept through the bare trees of the early season. I wasn't looking out at the orchard. I was looking at my wife and son. Then the three of us crossed the field together toward the house, carrying an apple pie. And perhaps that is the one thing it took me a lifetime to learn. That love doesn't ask how many years we have left. It only asks whether we dare to live truthfully in the years we have. It took me 3 years to dare to cross a field I looked at every morning. And sometimes I wonder what I nearly lost just because I was afraid I wasn't young enough to deserve it. If this story made you think of someone you once let slip away for reasons that sounded logical at the time, then maybe you'll want to stick around a little longer. Next time, we will sit with a woman who returns to her old town after 20 years, standing on the porch of a house she swore she would never come back to, and the man who opens the door isn't who she thought she was coming to find. Quiet Porch Stories is a place for evenings just like this, when you want to believe there is still time for the things that matter. Small stories about the moments that change everything. See you next time, right here on this porch.